Hello, my name is Rui Lopes. I'm a pre-sales manager for Panda Security US, and welcome to our webinar about Petya, yet another ransomware outbreak. The reality of ransomware is not new. The first ransomware attack goes as back as 1989, but obviously what worries all of us is the resurgence and the sophistication behind the latest ransomware attacks. This informative webcast will aim at explaining you what happened and how. So I don't want to dig into too many technical details, but get you a really good recap and overview about what were the vectors for the attack and propagation techniques that were utilized for Petya. Recommendations. The industry, or should I say the usual for the industry, on recommendations on how to prevent this type of attacks, and the proposal of Panda for a truly preventive approach, not only to Petya or not only to ransomware, but to sophisticated and zero-day based attacks. So what happened with Petya? 27th of June 2017, a large-scale attack using a variant of the ransomware family known as GoldenEye affected more than 60 countries. So the reality of, like I mentioned before, of ransomware is not new or not newly known in the industry, goes as back as 1989, but we've seen a lot of attacks recently, high-scale, high-profile attacks based on ransomware. And what happened with this one was similar in propagation to what happened with the latest WannaCry. So impact, really fast impact across different types of companies and services across Europe and the United States. So we're talking about government offices, health systems, power grid, transportation. A study that we had access in Panda quite recently about the reality of Norway alone, actually 2,000 companies in Norway alone, and about 2016 states that in the last year, 58% of the queried companies stated having been subject to malware attacks and 55% to ransomware. So what happened in the 27th of June 2017 with Petya is a consequence, as I've already mentioned, of the resurgence and the sophistication, the increasing sophistication of ransomware-based attacks. So the naming was deemed Petya, GoldenEye, non-Petya, so blame the AV industries for the naming conventions. But in any case, we're talking about the specific, or we will be talking about the specific variant that not only encrypts data files, but also the master boot record of the hard disk. So next time you reboot, you're going to be blocked from accessing the system because the endpoint will not boot. The master boot record will be encrypted as well. We're going to see how that is accomplished in a few seconds. So details, technical details, payload details, distributed as a dynamic link library, is a DLL. DLLs have this wonderful characteristic of having export functions, which is for this case perfect. So it uses the Windows Crypto API to encrypt hard drives and drive fixed type devices. That means hard drives and flash storage. For each compromised drive that is identified through the drive fixed type, there will be a 120-bit AES key generated and after generating a different and differentiated key for each drive, the encryption process begins. It doesn't encrypt all files, which is also typical of this type of attack. 65 different file extensions that are hard-coded are encrypted. So obviously mainly user data files. Additionally, with gained administrator permissions, the hard disk master boot record is overwritten, so it is encrypted in the next reboot. We're going to see in a second how those admin permissions are gained, but this is, I believe, the most important and significant differentiator if we want to compare this ransomware stream with WannaCry, for example. The fact that we're talking about something that has the potential to encrypt the master boot record of the hard drive, rendering the boot or the operating system unusable because it's not able to boot. So a scheduled task is created to reboot the endpoint in about an hour, knowing that obviously it's not in every situation that the reboot is going to be close to the time that the payload is delivered. And upon reboot, and you can see it on the right side of the slide, rogue check disk message is shown, and that is repairing the hard disk, and then the ransomware node. So the ransomware node asks for $300 worth of Bitcoin to a specific address with a specific installation key, which is generated with the AES 120-bit key that initially is generated for each compromised drive, and with a built-in RSA public key. Entry and propagation. The primary source, and it's the only primary source that has been confirmed across vendors. It was a compromised, updated process of an Ukrainian tax accounting software house called Medoc. We were able, in our backend at Panda Labs, to see activity from this updated process that clearly demonstrates that the updated process itself runs the DLL that is the main vector for the attack. Propagation. It's we know a lot more about the propagation. The main particular propagation vector is the usage of the same Eternal Blue Internal Romance server message block SMB exploit that was used in the WannaCry attack. And that was corrected in the security update MS17.010 in March 14. So if the systems were not patched against this type of SMB exploit, Petya has the ability to use that SMB exploit that has been corrected with by Microsoft with this patch. But it has a failover method. So if the SMB exploit fails, PSExec, the known admin tool, the next best thing, as it self-proclaims, next best thing to a telnet, is utilized to attempt remote executions. Of course, those of you that know the PSExec tool, we need administrative credentials to run the process in the remote system, and those are obtained by dumping user credentials in memory with a modified version of the Mimikatz tool. So if user credentials, administrator user credentials, aren't in memory, at that point, those will be dumped with the Mimikatz tool and passed the administrative credentials as parameters to PSExec. So again, the DLL can be run massively and remotely across the internal network. If as a secondary option to this method, the Windows Management Instrumentation Console is also used. So this scripting environment is built in the operating system and can be used also to allow remote execution of processes, in this case, also to run the DLL remotely. So you can see on the right side the simplified commands that are used in for PSExec and WMIC, but the goal is just to illustrate that the objective is to run the main vector, the main payload DLL for the attack. So recommendations. Spoke about vectors, propagation methods. What can, and now that's with our short summary, we know what this is about, what can be done to prevent this type of attacks. So we know about the vector that was related with the Ukrainian tax accounting software MEDOC compromise updated, but of course, additional vectors were registered and are expected. So be particularly cautious with emails. Attached documents should be verified or should be scanned for incoming and outgoing email by an inline platform. So an antivirus that works inline, preferably at the transport layer, or scanning all the mailboxes at the endpoint layer. But in any case, scanning in transits is much better than scanning when it gets to the mailbox, for obvious reasons, because you don't give the user even for what is intercepted as malware the chance to double click it and open the attachment. So the point is, outgoing, incoming email should always be scanned to prevent this vector. Batch policies for operating systems and third-party software must be in place. And specifically, about MS 17010 or about security patches from Microsoft for the Windows operating system that have been widely available are your patching policies, first for Windows and for third parties, up to date, because they need to be. And there's a lot to be said about the reason why systems are not patched. That would be a topic and will be a topic for other webinars, but the fact still remains. This type of attacks uses vulnerabilities in software that in most cases are corrected. And we're talking about operating system, and we're talking about third parties as well. So patching policies and the tools to ensure that patching policies are deployed must be in place. Well, I'm not going to talk much about backup, so this is the obvious. Backup policies need to be in place and backup need to be available. But what can be a topic for a further discussion is the fact that every vendor will tell you that a corporate antivirus needs to be fully deployed and updated, which is true. But the question is, how preventive can a company be, or can a security strategy, security posture be, with a block known bad, allow everything else approach that is particular to the corporate antivirus? And this just means that we will be talking about keeping, apart from the patch, essentially for ransomware, the patching policies that we've seen what happened with WannaCry, the backups. But whenever we'll talk about corporate antivirus and the need to have it fully deployed and updated, we'll be repeatedly talking about it when the corporate antivirus should, with the technologies available to it, be able to stop these attacks. Why doesn't it then? The essence of the issue is the fundamental structure of the corporate antivirus as such. Everything, and the antivirus works by preventing execution of everything that the engine and the definition files approach of the antivirus knows to be bad. In other words, that the vendor at some point in time, as with a degree of certainty with a specific signature or with heuristic or behavior technologies considered malicious, it's going to block that. What will happen to everything else that won't be blocked by one of the technologies in the antivirus engine? It will be allowed to run. And that's the problem with the zero-day attacks, because no vendor knows it, and thus no technology had, or no security vendor technology has had the time to update with definition files or behavioral analysis that can adequately prevent and stop that new attack. So it seems like we need an alternative to this type of, not this type of technology, but this type of model. And yes, not specifically about the antivirus as a technology, because if we think about it, the antivirus, or when we talk about next generation antivirus, or even endpoint detection and response, or about the circumstance and the antivirus is that, let's not, or let's keep in mind that the antivirus is actually a set of technologies. So we start with malware signature. So this is the detection when the vendor, the type of detection that indicates that the vendor knows exactly the hash of the file that should be blocked as the main vector or the main payload for a specific infection. But that's not all that the antivirus is. You have generic and heuristic detections that are kind of approximations to being able to proactively detect new variants of a given threat based on what the vendor knows of a mainstream. Also, malicious URL blocking, URL reputation for sites that are known to be the source of malicious code. Blocking access to that site will, by the security solution, will prevent software from, or malicious software from being downloaded to it from it. Uh, Contextual detections are also part of, or what are called contextual detections are part of antivirus security solutions. So they're aimed at stopping specific actions, and in the case of ransomware, stopping the process at that point, for example, where encryption action is detected using some sort of encryption API in the system. In any case, and that's the issue, anything that the antivirus product does not detect will be allowed to run. Everything that is not detected with the signature file, with an heuristic triggered or genetic detection, blocked from a URL, or blocked at a specific point with an action that is for which the antivirus is prepared to block or consider malicious, anything outside this scope at a given point in time will be allowed to run. So there's an alternative, and there's the need for an alternative to this model, something that covers that window of opportunity, or that a gap that exists in the antivirus model for everything that the antivirus allows to execute because it doesn't know it's bad. And things are changing now. When we say here in this slide, for example, that the next cyber attack is about to come, well, it is coming already. We're already looking at Petya variants that, for example, in which, for example, the installation key to pay to get the decryption key for the ransom bears no relation to the key that is generated when the hard disks are encrypted, or to the relationship between the RSA 128-bit key and the public key. That means that that code will get you to pay the $300 for the ransom, but will never be able to decrypt your files. So it's purely destructive. They have no way, even after you pay, to get your files back. And another variant that we're looking shows the same encryption window, purely destructive again, but it is designed to upload the files that are encrypted first to outside servers. So it's a new level in ransomware. So, and we should expect new variants to be created as we speak now. So the next cyber attack, it's not about to come, it's happening already. And we need an alternative to a model that is unable to cover what security vendors don't know is happening at a given point in time. It's a matter of speed, and it's also a matter of volume. Adaptive defense is the truly preventive approach that Panda Security has developed, not only to this specific type of attack, or this specific attack or type of attack, but as a new security model. What is it based in? instead of being based in antivirus technology as we describe it, we are basing our security model in trust. So applications are allowed to execute in or based on the trust that our system is giving them. That means that we are not actively allowing applications to execute in each endpoint because they're not bad. We are allowing them to run because we trust them, because we've classified them before and will allow them to run on the basis that they are good applications. This happens because we're currently or permanently, better said, classifying and attesting to 100 of all running processes in the endpoints being run because they're legitimate programs. They're goodware. We've seen them before, we've classified them as good, and we're stating that the behavior and the way that application is interacting with the operating system, the user, the circumstances in which it is run are the same for the same application being used anywhere else in the world where an endpoint has an adaptive defense agent installed. So, or has for this purpose a sensor that enables us to correlate the information that comes from the applications. In any case, we are allowing applications to run again because they're good, not because they're not bad. And we want, if we talk about execution control or application execution control, we want to make clear and we want to base this technology on the fact that this is a managed approach to it. So all the heavy lifting with application approval that the admin would have to undertake if we were talking about a whitelisting or we could what we could name as a classic whitelisting solution have been taken care of, have been taken off the admin. Panda as a service will be the one classifying all running applications and allowing them to execute on the basis of them being good. Of course, if like any other antivirus solution, if we already know by behavior or with a specific definition or signature file that a specific application that is run for the first time in a system is already malware, we are going to block it. But the service behind adaptive defense really starts when a user double clicks some file that was never seen in our backend, meaning it doesn't have a goodware reputation, so it won't be allowed to run because of that, but it doesn't have a malware reputation either. So the goal here, and that's the core of the model, is to know exactly what it is before allowing it to execute. So we're constantly monitoring all processes on a company's computers and servers through an agent that is installed in every endpoint and server and managed obviously through a centralized console. Whenever we find that a user is executing an application that does not have a reputation in our cloud, meaning it does not have a reputation for being good and should be allowed to execute, or it is not recognized as known malware, we're going to upload that file and classify it automatically or with the assistance of actual technical experts that will reverse engineer the file and issue a verdict on it. Most of what we classify, more than 99% of what we classify automatically in a matter of minutes using machine learning technologies and big data in our backend. But for complex code or for code in which the automatic system cannot decide on, we have actual technical experts analyzing the files and providing a verdict. In any case, the goal is that 100% of all running processes being executed at a given point in time in an endpoint or in a server are attested to. So we are not allowing, like in the antivirus model, applications to be executed because they're not bad. We are making sure that everything that is executed is good. So again, the model is based on the classification of 100% of all running processes and also on collecting continuous endpoint telemetry information and reporting about the relationship. And that's what machine learning means in our reality, the relationship between what is happening with the specific application and the same in environment A and the same application in other endpoint in environment A compared to what is happening in environment B, C, D. So that's what big data correlation. We're establishing patterns and looking for deviations. Every time we find unknown content, we are going to be able to receive that information, real-time information, and receive the information in real time. So full visibility and control, counting not only with machine learning techniques, but also dedicated malware analysts. In any case, like I said before or mentioned before, we aim at classifying 100% of all running applications. So at any given point in time, potentially a user that double clicks or downloads an application, an executable file, or a library that is yet not known, has not been classified by our backend system as goodware, that application can be suspended or denied execution until we know what it is. And that's what the model is about. Classifying 100% of running applications and making sure that before something executes, we know exactly what it is. We've seen it before, we've classified it as good, and we're monitoring it across the sensors that are running the same service. So this is our proposal and an alternative to the antivirus model and even some of the so-called next generation technologies. Facts and numbers related with this approach. Panda has profiled the Petya payload as malicious 1 day before most of the first vendors detecting it. So we had already profiled Petya on the 26th. So 0 Panda customers were affected by Petya thanks to the advanced technology of adaptive defense. And going back to the first point, that allowed us to receive information about that yet unknown, unclassified DLL from our sensors before it widespread. So it's definitely an approach to look at. Thank you. Thanks for attending our webinar. I'll be open to questions. Got a few interesting questions. RAR, zip, GS, jar, and other malicious files of this type, what will happen with them? In the case of compressed files, so we're monitoring two vectors. One, executable or portable executable files, and the other one, everything that we classify as goodware for injection of code in memory. So when we talk about, in your example, when we talk about compressed files, we will be looking at operations performed, let's say, in and out of those compressed files. If those compressed files bear executable or portable executable files, and let's imagine a zip file has 3 or 4 files, 3 of which we know to be good, and the 4th is a yet unknown, unclassified file, the action of WinZip or WinRAR, uncompressing that file, will trigger the classification request. So when we sanction, and this is a very important thing about the model, when we sanction something to run because it's goodware, we don't forget about it and allow it to execute because simply because it's goodware. It's the other way around, in fact. We're constantly monitoring the goodware that we allow to run for its interaction with other processes that might be potentially yet unknown. And one of the examples is the compressed file situation. The other example is obvious, the download of files. When we're monitoring the browser, the downloaded file is written in the hard disk, and we actually have a goodware file that might potentially be writing a yet unknown, unclassified, portable executable file that needs classification. That operation alone, using the browser to download a file, will eventually trigger the classification request. Another interesting question, can malware that has been able to infect a classified goodware file will be able to run? We address this with the second perspective that I described, our anti-exploit module. And our anti-exploit module is aimed at looking at operations that are performed mostly in memory against goodware processes that are running in memory. So, and that might not have an base at that point in an executable file or in a portable executable file that we can classify. So yes, we address the monitoring and code that is run against executable files that are running and sanctioned to run because they're goodware. I had a couple questions also about what I described as the latest variants of Petya not being able to decrypt even if the ransom is paid. Correct. We see in the code that unencryption key or the key that is written in the ransom screen is actually random generated. It has nothing to do with the key that was used to encrypt the hard disk. That means that if you send that key over and pay the ransom, the files are lost because there is no relationship between that key and the files that were encrypted. Another interesting question is, what protection does the standard endpoint protection offer against this type of attack? It is important to consider that everything that is classified at some point by adaptive defense, at some point again as a yet unknown unclassified file, which turns out to be malware, and after we issue the malware alert, will eventually end up as a signature and are available to not only adaptive defense to recognize it as known malware, but also to endpoint protection. But the truly preventive approach, obviously, is in adopting the security posture that enables you to suspend execution of a specific executable file at the point that is still yet unknown to us. What you get with endpoint protection is a signature that within the antivirus and what we describe to be the antivirus model will make that detection available after, within the Panda world, we've seen it for the first time and classified it for the first time with our adaptive defense sensors. Another interesting question, as we develop our own applications, how will adaptive defense act? That's a very common scenario. And the way that adaptive defense works in that case is you have obviously the ability using a file name to employ exclusions, which is the first obvious way, like you would do for an antivirus product. But the adaptive defense console that gives you visibility about every item that was suspended execution or preventively blocked for classification. The administrator can have access to that queue and sanction that file to run, which could be a new build of your own application while we are in the process of classifying it, and eventually classify it, obviously, as goodware. So there is a way for the admin to override the preventive block that was imposed by the triggering of the classification process on finding an unknown file. There's another approach also that consists if you have staging endpoints, you can allow locally those endpoints to allow execution of a file that is yet unknown and classified. But the first option would be the one used for that kind of scenario. So the admin can have access to the queue of files that were preventively blocked and sanction that file to run while we are in the process of classifying it. Does it work in the same way if you're using cloud-based applications? So we're classifying executable files, portable executable files, and also looking at processes that are running in memory for code that might be tampering with it. So we address cloud-based applications in the sense that we will be monitoring every executable content that comes from and to them using a browser, because we're monitoring the browser, and we will be looking at attacks that are aimed at the browser itself. How long does adaptive defense take to classify a piece of software as good? Could it introduce significant delays? Another interesting question. More than 99% of what we classify in a matter of minutes, meaning automatically. We are looking at less than 1% of all the code that gets to our file classification system to be looked at by technicians. And the average of this process, if it involves expert review, is around 24 hours. But of course, it has to do with the complexity of the code. But the majority, the huge majority of what we classify will be classified in a matter of minutes automatically. So another question, which hints some familiarity with adaptive defense and with the different security postures that can be configured to prevent this ransomware. We need to have our users in lock mode. So, and the distinction, we have 3 security postures that can be applied in adaptive defense. Specific to endpoints, departments, sites, etc., or across the board. One is audit, non-intrusive, will classify every executable file, issue malware alerts, observe, report, but don't interfere in the sense that it won't stop anything. So we'll issue all the malware alerts, classify 100% of the files, but we won't be stopping any malware applications from running. The default setting is hardening. In this setting, we will be suspending execution of files that typically come or have a vector of internet. So we'll be monitoring browsers, we'll be monitoring email clients, we'll be monitoring specific types of operations, and suspending the execution of yet unknown, unclassified files if they use the external internet vector to enter the system. And files that are already in the system in the internal network will of course be, if they're yet unknown, unclassified, will be sent for classification along with telemetry, but they won't be stopped execution. They will be stopped execution afterwards if they're later classified as malware. But if they're downloaded with the browser, if they get to the system with an attachment using an email client, they will be suspended execution while in the process of classifying it. But there's another alternative, which is the one that is contained in the question, lock mode. Lock mode will preventively suspend execution, block the execution of all yet unknown, unclassified files, no matter their origin. And no matter how they got to the system. If they're not yet known, don't have a good reputation in our cloud, they will not execute until we determine them to be good. And this is the approach. Of course, this approach is not applicable in all scenarios, but it's a more aggressive approach in the sense that there is no logic to allow a yet unknown, unclassified file to execute, except if sanctioned by the administrator. But it's indeed the most secure approach against this type of attacks. There's another specific set of questions that, in the interest of time, we'll address and answer afterwards, after this session. Thank you very much for attending our webinar, and good morning or good afternoon.